Okay, so I this is my second attempt at recording this video because I recorded the whole thing, but my mic was my settings were wrong, so I uploaded a 26-minute video of me gesturing with no audio. But I did come upon the title of the video and the sentiment I'm trying to get at for this topic. And it is narratively rich moments and or narratively rich campaigns. So one of the main things, or the thing that started this line of thought, I guess I'll say, uh, was around some of the friends that I play D&D, but we weren't playing D&D. Um, and one of the friends was reminiscing about this campaign that we had almost 3 years ago at this point. It was like two and a half ish. At least it was. No, it was under. I think it was around two when we finished it, because we finished it in like early 2021 ish, something along those lines. But they were reminiscing about how like the role play and the narrative moments in that game were like their favorite and like the highest heights they've experienced with D&D so far. And they felt like one of the big reasons was they were given a pre-made character that they had to inhabit. So they felt it was like somehow, I'm not saying this derogatorily, by the way, it was somehow closer to like true acting than when you come up with your own character, which is a sentiment I could not fully understand. I mean, I can understand it, but I can't relate to it because in that very same campaign, I was also given a pre-made character and I struggled, especially the first few sessions. I really struggled not to just inhabit this character, but to even get into the game. It was like it was a character I was not interested in because one, at that point in my TTRPG lifespan, one, I was not interested in dwarves, and I was not interested in overly religious characters. Like I was fine with a character that had a god. Like I was playing with some ideas that would eventually become my Raven Queen Executioner in the Curse of Strahd game that I'm playing in. That's a pretty religious character, but I didn't want to play like an overly like a straight-laced devoted paladin type, and that's who this guy was, Luan Mitral. He was very on like all honor code, help little guy, be brave, do do brave knight shit, basically. And I was not into that type of character, but over the course of the campaign, I came to love this character, and he's one of my more fondly remembered characters. But it got me thinking about why that player found those moments so interesting. And I think part of it, now thinking about it, part of it is that one, these are characters we wouldn't have played normally. I wouldn't have played a dwarf, and my friend would not have played Harrow Belane, a human cleric. That is not their sensibilities. Like that's just not the type of character they would go for, and it forced them to inhabit a different kind of role, which that I think is like the real value of what they were getting at. It's not that it was a pre-generated character that they had to inhabit. It's that it got them out of their normal what they normally play. Because that person, he plays rogues all the time. Rogues, sorcerers, like self-powered, leaning on arrogant types. Um, and I've been playing with them for a while. All of their characters tend to be pretty similar. They're playing a Tabaxi Bard in another game, and that's a relatively large diversion, but they're playing into other aspects of their personality. They're still them. Um, more or less, if that makes any sense. But this character was very far and away. This is like a very inquisitor, like Spanish Inquisition type inquisitor, um, ambitious religious type, um, always willing to let the pawns do the dirty work, that type of thing. And I guess it was just such a different character for them, which they don't do willingly. And since then, they've done that a little bit more. But they're that demonstrates the value in playing a character that you wouldn't otherwise. Excuse me. Um, and something like totally random generation, I think really helps with that. Which for our Friday night game, I'm running uh, I guess a hiatus game where everything was like all the character stuff was randomly generated, their race, their class, all that stuff. And that's been a blast so far, but that's lower stakes. It's not as narratively dense, which is kind of the main point I want to get into here. This campaign with these characters it was narratively tight and it was narratively dense. These are the terms I'm going to use here. Because it was about 15 sessions and everything was like, I don't want to use the term like designed, but everything was really heavily prepped. All the characters were designed to have very specific roles. Luan was the straight-laced, honorable paladin type that technically answered to this ambitious, selfish, kind of leaning towards evil cleric of the goddess of light. Then you had this like hunter, fighter, I can't think of a good word to describe him, but like, a a Mad Max type, I guess. That's the only word that really springs to mind. He like grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, had every reason to hate the church. I don't know why that's Mad Max, but then you had a pretty standard elf thief, and then we had a wizard that was also doing stuff. And there were tons of moments in this campaign because the name of the campaign, Betrayal, was like a really big thing about it. Like we were told like early on that depending on how the game goes, one or more of the characters is going to betray the others. And what ended up happening is Geralt ended up betraying everyone. The thief and the wizard sort of ended up on this like third side that was like kind of nebulous. Like in the final confrontation, the two gods versus each other, which that was a big thing. It was set in a mansion. We're trying to recover these ancient artifacts and prevent like an apocalypse, a fight between the god of light and god of darkness. Obviously, these two are on the side of light, blah blah blah. But so there was these like betrayal mechanics here and there, and we ended up fighting at the end, which was really fun. And it made a lot of moments earlier on more important, kind of retroactively. Because and I'm going to pick out a few moments from that just as a demonstrate as an example. So early on there was this segment where the whole house is a dungeon and we're trying to figure out the puzzles and traps and shit. And this big furnace wanted us to feed one of the three caretakers into it and it would give us a bunch of stuff. Luan was against that. Luan was against it, but it was like, okay, this is one of the puzzles. This might be something we have to do, but I don't want to do it. And this is how I remember it. I might be slightly off, but Luan was against it. Harrow was kind of like, no, we should probably do it. And then Gerald was pretty much for it. And I remember Geralt, I keep changing the pronunciation, Geralt being the one to actually grip up the caretaker and throw him in. And it's just Harrow and Geralt convinced Luan not to intervene. So Luan didn't like really receive much um, consequences for that action. Neither did Geralt. Harrow did. That was a big thing because at the end of the campaign, Harrow sought um, forgiveness from the remaining two caretakers, and that was a nice aspect of his story. um, which I'm not really going to go into that, but it was another whole thing. It was another series of character moments, and then there was another like that's changed the relationship between these two characters. We were fighting this dragon that the wizard stupidly provoked, but that's a separate target. That's a separate tangent. We were fighting this dragon, and the fight was starting to look a little hairy. So our cleric, instead of like staying there and trying to heal everyone, he ran off to a different part of the mansion to try to power up this artifact he had because it was like his only idea. And it was such a Hail Mary type thing, which if you're going to talk to the min max or the optimizer, um the fighting game player in me, it was like, why the fuck did you do that? Like, go try to do some narrative nonsense, whatever, when you just had to keep healing us and this fight would have gone fine. Um, so instead, he ran away and it was even more hairy, but we still won. Then I can't remember if he actually powered it up or not, but he came back and the dragon was dead. And my paladin, who was subservient to this cleric, immediately just punches him in the gut and you're not my superior anymore. You're a coward. So that fundamentally changed that relationship, which was interesting. Like that's those like really narratively rich things that you kind of look for in these games. And this what was another one? Oh, another one was before Geralt betrayed us all. We found a basketball court. We found a basketball court, and Luan, apparently dwarves play basketball in this universe because that's the way the roles went. It's like, oh yeah, this is an old dwarven game. So these two characters were having this bonding moment over basketball. I think we called it something else, but we had this bonding moment, and then that made the later betrayal juicier, which was kind of the point. So this player that was talking about this campaign and reminiscing, they were talking about how in their recent games, like they feel like these kinds of moments haven't actually happened, and they're wondering why. And one of the main reasons they came upon was the pre-gen characters, which I completely disagree with. But one of the bigger reasons was because it was more narratively dense. Like everything was much more planned out, and basically everything that occurred was always character and story relevant because it wasn't the same type of game. It wasn't just a little. There was no like, okay, you guys are traveling. Roll this. Oh, you find five cabbages. When you go to pick it, they're all mimics. Like, you're not just like it's a very different vibe than just like a Friday night game that you're just running for your friends. This was a much more narrative heavy game, which is the point. Um, so you're going to find those types of moments, and a lot of our other games haven't gotten to the point or haven't like lasted long enough to really like build up those character relationships and really get to like just get to the point where all these kinds of moments can really happen. Like in our Erlmeyer game that we haven't played in almost 2 years now, 1.5 years at this point ish. I think the last time we played was like Thanksgiving ish 2021. Um, so this game, I've been playing that game for we played that game for a while since like early or mid 2020 mid 2020 we played, but is when we started. But that game we spent most of it in a city doing stuff, and none of it was like super character relevant. Like our one gnome who that our gnome rogue who was actually the DM of this betrayal campaign. It was relevant to their character, but there wasn't a whole lot else for every other character. And not everything was narratively rich. Like it was not narratively dense to get these. Maybe I should define these concepts. So narratively dense meaning like there's just a lot of narrative everywhere. like everything is relevant to whatever the narrative is. It's less about just playing a game. Like, okay, what do you find? Oh, I find, like I said, cabbages. Um, and narratively tight is like not only is everything not only does everything make sense narratively and relates back to the overarching story and to the characters' individual narratives, but the pacing is also good. There's not You're not spending all this extra time like mulling over less important details. The pacing was really good. So maybe narratively tight isn't good. Maybe I'll have to come up with a different concept, but that's kind of what we're getting at here. None of our other games really have gotten to that point. Like in Erlmeyer, like nothing. We've just been in a city that's not really related to us, and also the main narrative isn't really about the characters. It's about there's this big evil death god that we gotta stop. So it's really not about the characters. And there's nothing so far. There just hasn't been any developments that like encourage those types of moments. Same thing in Fallmeyer, another game that's on hiatus. Lots of Myers on hiatus. Um, for past several sessions, the characters have been doing this like drow refugee plot line, which is cool, but it's not narratively rich. It's not narratively dense. There is narrative, but it's not really tied to the main narrative. It's just an arc. It's a thing they're doing. It's not, you know, there's not a lot of these like really strong role play interactions. There was um some of the characters have died and come back. Another character did die, which was my character's best friend in that game. So that's like a pretty heavy thing, but those are just things that have happened to the character. They haven't had to make any like gray decisions. And that's not like, oh, you can option A gets you like money and power but is morally bankrupt, but option B doesn't get you any actually reward but gets you good boy points. Like nothing like that. It's more like you have to choose one of two things and neither of them is actually better than the other. Like discounting morality, it's just like you just have to side with one or the other and neither of them is better. So far there headphones did that thing where they timed out. I don't know why they do that. Anyway, fuck. What was I talking about? There haven't been any choices like that. Um, even when it comes to the drow, like there were choices there. Like, do we try to persuade them to do this? Do we try to help them do that? And it was like there were a bunch of like bad options, and we picked help them go south because that was like seemingly the best option. Was kind of it. But some of those other things, like especially my character's best friend dying, that was a narratively heavy thing that happened to him. But there's no like real choices. It's going to affect the character's development going forward, but there was no real choice involved there. Um, some of our other games, choices like these, I think, have happened. In our Ugliest Man Alive game, um, my character decided to use their forbidden swords that they're honor bound from using. He decided to use them to save another character that like again, this character's player is decided to come back to our Ugliest Man Alive game after being away for a while, and we found their character like um, taken prisoner, and we were accidentally rescuing them. But seeing that, it drove my character into kind of a rage, and he used his forbidden swords. for that reason. And it was this really cool moment from my perspective, but I don't feel that any of the other players like really felt as strongly about it or even noticed, you know? Um, in fact, one of the players asked me about it later, like, why were those swords so important for your character? It's like, okay, you haven't been listening this whole campaign. But that's, again, a separate issue. um, and then later on, that I think that next session, as a result of what has been transpired, my character disavowed working with this merchant lord out of honor, and that resulted in him being forbidden from doing business in like half the city, which that was a very strong role play decision, I think. But I don't know how many of the players really remember that. And then another point is a lot of our games haven't been played long enough. In our Curse of Strahd game that I play on Mondays, there's been a ton of good stuff going on. Like, there's been lots of good like role play decisions, I think. We're in the middle of we're in Strahd's castle. We're going up through it. We just at the end of like the dungeon to then get up into the castle. Strahd appeared to us in an illusion, in a like a illusory. I always have trouble with that word. Illusory form, and handed and threw the mask of one of the background NPCs for my character, and said, "Okay, you can leave. I'll give you a choice. You can leave, and your sister can go with you. I'll let her go. If you also leave, and you can walk into the mists, and you go back to the normal world, and everything will be fine. You'll forget all about Barovia. But if you go upstairs and continue to try to kill me, then you'll find your sister's head waiting for you." That kind of moment. And for me, for that character, there was never a doubt that he would even like he considered leaving, but it was for like a fraction of a second. He would never abandon his duty. He knows him and his order are could die at any time, and that would just be their fate. Like because they follow the matron of ravens. So that is what it is. These things have to be done. And the only one to blame here is Strahd, not him, not his sister. So there's been, and that game has been going on for over a year. We've been playing it, like, not not as consistently as everyone would like. I think, like, we passed the anniversary, I think, like a month and a half ago of our 1 year anniversary of that game, and we hadn't played like 52 sessions. I think total at that point we had played like 35 because we had like a big, like a 6 week hiatus, I think, something like that. But that's different. Like there's a lot of factors that can contribute to these types of moments and these types of campaigns. Whether it's like just flat out length of the campaign, it's what the players are looking for, because that's another factor for some of our other games. A lot of the players aren't they're either not as interested in these really narratively rich things, or they're not capable, and that's not a derogatory thing. Let's be clear. Um, they're just that's not what they're gonna do, and that's not to say they can't do it. They just haven't shown or haven't gone for it yet. So yeah, it's like possible length of the campaign. It's the type and level of the players, like what they're capable of. It's um, the nature of the campaign itself, whether it's like really tightly designed or it's more open and there's more room to meander. When you've got room to meander, you're going to be picking mimic cabbages. So, all right, so that was the second version of this video. I think it's a little better. I'm a little less rambly, and there's a bit more information that I wanted to get into it. I don't think I'm going to need a part two this time, but I'm sure I'll think of some relevant information sooner or later, and I may make a second separate video about that. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say on this topic.